You're back with America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse, and this next segment is brought to you by a new sponsor. It's the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce in North Central Oregon, and that's where we're taking you next, because I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to go to one of my favorite places. It's a state park, but it's not a state park like any you've been to before. It's called Cottonwood Canyon State Park. It offers fishing, it offers hunting, it offers wildlife viewing, hiking, biking, horseback riding. You can do it all in an unspoiled setting along a beautiful river. With us here to tell you more about it is the park manager for Cottonwood Canyon State Park. His name, Tom Peterson. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, John. Great to be here.
So, Tom, I love this park, as you know, because you see me every year or so when I come down there to go hiking and fishing. But for our listeners who are unfamiliar with this newer park, it's only about 4 or 5 years old, that's been created along the John Day River in North Central Oregon. Why don't you describe exactly what you have there for our listeners?
You bet, John. It's 8,000 acres of rugged canyon land. Big basalt spires, cliff walls, and a nice free-flowing river, the John Day, which is kind of the last free-flowing river this side of the Yellowstone. So, yeah, and it's unique. It's a desert climate, and so you get a lot of sage and native grasses, and it's just kind of a stunning environment. I would say the thing that stands out the most is that if you sit there and you just kind of be quiet for a while, you'll gain a sense of solitude that we don't have at a lot of other places. And it's just a wonderful spot because of the lack of railroads, and there's no freeway noise or anything like that. It's just really this kind of wild spot out here in Eastern Oregon.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the solitude because on my last hike there, and folks, they've got a great trail system there that goes both upstream and downstream along the John Day. I took a trail that will take you about 4.5 miles one way. I was about 3 miles in, and I did exactly what you said. I just stood there and just soaked in the silence and the bird song and the gentle breeze, and it was just wonderful in this day and age of busyness and noise to get to a place where there really wasn't any. It's just such an unspoiled environment that you get to have there. And this is a very unique state park because it's not your grassy lawn state park. It's a very wild area. How did this come to be? What was it before it was a state park?
Well, it used to be a cattle ranch, John. The Murthas owned this property since 1965, and they ran cattle for, a good 35, 40 years there. And they really kept it in a natural state. And so, besides the cattle and a few cowboys, there weren't really a whole lot of people out there. And Oregon State Parks kind of took a gamble on this one because they'd never really done anything in a wild kind of setting like this. But the beauty and the solitude, as you suggested, are just so overwhelming. They decided to go ahead and go for it. And it also offered this great opportunity on the John Day, which there isn't a whole lot of access. And with this acquisition, we were able to get about 13 miles of riverfront property that was kind of unprecedented on the John Day.
Oh, it really is, Tom. And folks, what you're going to find at the state park, there's the typical day use area when you get in there, though it's actually a really nice day use area with some buildings and some visitor info you ought to check out. Then there's the campground, and there's some wind shelters and some shade shelters and trees that are growing. Again, this is a new park. But then, again, the star of this place is what you get to do, the activities outside the campground. So the John Day River flows right past the day use area and the campground. There's boat launches right on the other side of the day use area, so you can launch a raft, though this time of year you're going to be pushing it at certain places. But this river that flows through this sagebrush desert, it is chock full of smallmouth bass. I think I hooked about 60 fish just in a morning of fishing, and that's not unusual, is it?
No, that's a pretty common story, John, and it's something I love to tell people about, especially if you got a new fisherman, a young boy or girl you want to bring out, man, you can get them hooked on fishing real quick. There is nothing like catching, and we've all been fishing, but catching's a whole other story. And it's a phenomenal fishery, and it continues to be. I'm just amazed at the number of fish you can catch in a small amount of time.
Well, and I'm going to be honest with you, folks. Most of the bass you're going to catch, they're going to be under 8 inches. They're small, but boy, they are feisty, and they will hit just about anything you throw at them. And the John Day, really small river, really easy to fish. This is not technical fishing at all. Throw out a fly, throw out a spinner, throw out a grub. You're going to get lots of bites, and there are some bigger fish. I've caught a 4-pounder out of the John Day before, so don't be surprised if you don't catch something bigger. There's also catfish in the John Day, and at certain times of year, especially starting in the fall, the steelhead start coming in too. So bring sometimes maybe a bigger rod, some heavier line, because you might run into some bigger fish. Something else we need to talk about. Again, these trails that you have here, they go on both sides of the river. They cover so much of the river frontage. I hike them, but you don't have to hike them. There's other ways to get along these trails too, isn't there?
Yeah, so on the Lost Corral Trail, that's open to horses, equine, and then in addition, you can mountain bike as well. Actually, you can mountain bike also on Pinnacles Trail. And then there's the Hardstone Trail, which is open to horses and hikers. So all in all, I think it's about 14 total miles of trails that give you access to the river and just provide some stunning vistas of the canyon.
And don't forget your binoculars, folks, because there's lots of wildlife, too. I've had a herd of bighorn sheep cross right in front of me on the trail before. On my latest foray, I bumped several mule deer along the way, some of them really close up. I jumped a covey of Hungarian partridge, now called gray partridge, and flushed what I first thought were grouse. But, Tom, you told me at the park those were just hen pheasants. But when I talk about the wildlife, it's great to see in the off-season. But this is, again, unlike most state parks, you can hunt at this state park. What are people hunting there?
Coming this Saturday, they'll be going after mule deer. It's the beginning of rifle deer season, and they'll be camping in the campground, and just a mile down Pinnacles, you can begin hunting. The same thing goes for Lost Corral. You can hike down a mile or so, and you're free to hunt. There's signs there that tell you exactly where, and we got maps, property maps that'll show you, locations on where you can go. And then, we were open, of course, for bow season just up until recently. So that's what's coming. And then, of course, upland game. We've got all sorts of chukar and pheasant. That will go on until January once it gets started up here shortly.
So there you go, folks. This is truly a park for all seasons, whether you want to fish, whether you want to hunt, whether you want to watch wildlife, whether you want to hike, bike, or ride. Cottonwood Canyon State Park is one of the most beautiful places. You'll get to do it here in the Northwest, and it's such unique scenery. It's not the rainy Northwest. This is the dry Northwest, and it is so worth seeing and exploring. Tom, let's give out a website so folks can find out more about the park and arranging a stay there.
Okay, so just go to OregonStateParks.org, and it'll give you all sorts of information about camping, hiking, and other activities you can do there.
That's OregonStateParks.org, OregonStateParks.org. And if you don't want to spend the night camping, that's okay. There's a city close by. It's the Dalles, and they've got plenty of hotels for you. They've got the Shiloh Inn and the Celilo Inn that both overlook the Columbia River. They've got the #1 rated TripAdvisor hotel in town, which is the Fairfield Inn and Suites. And don't forget to save your appetite and maybe your thirst too, because there's several brew pubs and breweries here in the Dalles that really are worth a visit, especially after a day afield in Cottonwood Canyon State Park. Tom, thanks for telling us all about this today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thank you, John.